Hi, my name's Adam Clay from NWF. Just wanted to take a couple of minutes here to talk about maize harvest and making sure we've picked the right points to determine our crop maturity and therefore is it ready for harvest. So ideally we'll be choosing our harvest date based on dry matter, and we're targeting a dry matter of 32 to 35%. Okay, ideally edging up towards that 35% if we can. Now that might seem quite dry to some people that are used to taking it 30 to 32%. The reason why we want it at that level is because we're going to bring Clostridia bacteria in from the field anyway. That's going to happen, but it really struggles to survive once you get around that higher 35% dry matter level. Okay, if we get those wetter crops and that Clostridia bacteria in there, we'll lose dry matter. We get dry matter degradation through the winter, so you'll lose crop quantity, okay, but you'll also lose crop quality as well, because it creates a butyric fermentation which breaks down carbohydrates and energy, so we'll lose that quality as well. Now, if you take it a little bit drier, yes, it can be a little bit more difficult to compact in the clamp and get the oxygen out, but now modern machinery on clamps can generally do a very good job of getting that tighter compaction. Also, hopefully you're going to choose a silage additive as well, which has got enzymes in it to aid digestibility, and also an aerobic stability bacteria like a brevis that's really going to help to try to kill off that yeast bacteria that's going to develop potentially in the drier crops and lose out on stability later on into the winter. Okay, now unless you've got a chipper that can cut up that plant and send it to a lab, then you're going to struggle to know actually whether you're at 35% dry matter. So what you can do is you can look at that cob maturity. Okay, so take a cob, take off that forage element and break it in half and discard that element that's closest to the plant. And you want to look at what's called the milk line. Okay, so you're going from a darker yellow on the outside of the kernel, and it's gradually going to move to a whiter, more liquid on the inner element of the kernel there. Now that milk line is the progression of the maturity of starch as it develops down into the centre of the cob. The further you've got a darker yellow and if you've got a milk line, the higher starch level you've got in that crop. And we're not making green chop, we want to make an energy crop and a high starch crop. And I want that maize to be 35% plus, if I can get it, of a starch level. Okay, so that means laying down starch. Now ideally, that means a milk line of about half to 2/3 down into the centre. Okay, now once you get to half, you're potentially laying down an extra 0.5% of starch per day. So really valuable to get that starch, you really want that. The downside is that starch of course is getting drier and harder, which makes it more difficult for rumen bacteria to break it down. So you've got to make sure you're getting the processing of that grain correct. So when they start harvesting and they're bringing the first couple of loads in, just take a sample and lay it down on the flat and have a look at it and look at the processing quality of that grain. Okay, now I've just got on the bike here an example of 5 grains where I've halved those grains and just nicked the corner. Okay, you can see the surface area there is quite low, whereas on this sample, still 5 grains, but I've quartered them. I've chopped them into 4 pieces, and I've got significantly higher surface area. So if you imagine, that's really going to help the bacteria get into that grain and break down that starch, which it really needs to do to fully utilise it. We used to think that just nicking the corner or harvesting it was enough, but it's not. Okay, we need to be targeting a quarter split, so breaking each kernel up into 4 pieces. As we get that higher starch maturity into that kernel, we need all the help we can get to get that bacteria in there and break down and utilise that starch. So processing is absolutely key to that point. Okay, so hopefully that short video was useful. Please contact any of the NWF staff to give advice and help you out to make sure you get the best quality crop and harvest correctly to make sure we get the maximised use out of it through the winter feeding. Okay, thank you.